The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent behavior, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance, for understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise.
Hey everybody, like Chris just said, my name is Patrick. If I haven't had the pleasure to meet you, my mom always said when I was growing up, I've never met a stranger, so I'd love to meet you, and I'm sure we'd be fast friends. We could have a chat. To all my friends in the room, awesome to see you guys again. I'm so excited to be talking through part 3 of Solomon Says. Like Chris said, this is something I'm passionate about, not because I've arrived at anything, just because it's been such a huge transformative piece of my life, which I want to tell you a little bit about today. But if you've missed parts 1 and 2, I would encourage you to go back and listen to them on the podcast, go back and watch them online. Part 1 was an amazing setup. I think Chris walked through Proverbs 1 and just kind of setting us up for what Solomon's purpose was in writing many of these like to his son. Many of these Proverbs just trying to bring up his own child for these goals of us to be able to read the Proverbs and attain wisdom. And really the beginning of that, like Chris said in part 1, is the fear of the Lord, which isn't really a phrase we use a whole lot, but essentially this proper awe, honor, and respect, seeing God through this proper lens, which in those days was called the fear of the Lord. And really these two things fit together beautifully, and that could be a whole sermon in and of itself. I love what Chris did last week, and in fact, I wanted to talk through some of that in my sermon today, and I ended up cutting it out so we can save some time. But if you've missed parts 1 or part 2, I encourage you to go back and listen to it. But I want to start today just with some good news, probably for some people like myself in the room, and it's this, that you don't need to be brilliant to be wise. Maybe that's only good news for me. I don't know if it feels like good news for any of you, but it's a different kind of thing, kind of that academic, like brilliance, IQ and wisdom. They're two different things. They don't have to be mutually exclusive, but we don't have to be brilliant in order to be wise. But without wisdom, brilliance isn't enough. You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about? Like maybe you've met some of those people, don't elbow them right now. Anyway, if you've got brilliance without wisdom, it's just going to get everyone into trouble. You've maybe seen that happen. We've maybe seen that take place in some sectors of our world. Because here's what I believe, just to kind of kick things off, that our relationship to wisdom is actually one of the defining features of our lives. Straight up. Whether we have wisdom, how often we choose to use that wisdom that we've attained, determines a lot about how our lives are going to go. Determines a lot about the direction of our lives, determines a lot about the direction of our family's life. Which is why I'm so thankful for this hinge point in my life. I look back on it now as this hinge point. You know those kind of moments you maybe look back on in your life? It's like, wow, I remember that moment. Maybe it was however many years ago, maybe it was recently, and that really kind of charted a different course for my life. And I want to tell you about one of those today. I was 19 years old. I think it was the last week of my freshman year of college, and I went to this particular Christian college I'm not going to tell you the name of because I don't want you to judge me. I'll just go ahead and save you from that sin. Not in the same way Jesus wants to save us from our sin, but I'll prevent you from sinning by judging me because of the college I went to, because it was kind of strange. But I was at this college. Now, they had chapel like every day, which maybe sounds great, but it usually wasn't. But the campus pastor, who kind of honestly spoke a lot of the time, he was actually pretty great. And he was delivering this sermon. Again, it was the last week of college. And I thought he was pretty great. Everybody thought he was pretty great. He was probably one of the wisest people I had ever known up to that point in my life. And this is probably the only sermon that I actually remember. I was thinking about it this morning when I was going to say this. I don't think I can remember any sermon. There's a lot of, 4 years of college, chapel every single day. There's a whole lot of sermons. You can maybe do the math. You maybe got more brilliance than I do. There's a lot of sermons. This is the only one that I can actually remember and tell you about right now. It was a long time ago. And I actually can't remember anything he said in the sermon except this. So I'm going to tell you today. He said, when I was 19 years old, he either heard a sermon or some pastor told him, hey, there's 31 days in most months. There's 31 books or chapters in the book of Proverbs, you should try to read a proverb every day that kind of correlates with the day of the month. And he just said, and I started doing that, and I'm really grateful. And I probably wandered off because summer break was coming. I didn't really maybe hear what much else he said, but it was kind of like nonchalant in my mind, in my heart. I was like, that's pretty cool. I'm 19. He started when he was 19. He's really wise. I'll give that a go. Summer break, have some extra free time. I'm not taking classes. I just kind of started the habit. It takes like 5 to 7 minutes a day, and I just kind of got in the groove over the summer. It's like seemed like an easy time to start a new habit. Went back to college, and I've done it ever since. It's been 20 plus years. Well, just whatever day of the month it is, that's the proverb I read. Like I said, it takes about 5 to 7 minutes a day. Now, after 20 years, actually, so I did the math, I think yesterday. It's about 250 times I've read through Proverbs. Like everything Solomon says, all that Solomon says that we have recorded, I've read it about 250 times. It's kind of starting to sink in. Like something's happening. It takes a while. So I thought. And it's, I don't know, it's kind of a journey. It seems like the way that this works. I couldn't probably sit here and quote for you word for word like all the Proverbs, but I could probably give you the gist of most of the Proverbs if we sat and chatted about it. I can kind of see like where it's at on the page, at least in my Bible. In fact, I meant to have it up here. If someone's sitting with it, I may have left it in a chair back there. It's not a big deal. Maybe I'll do it in the second service. But I've actually got a problem. I've switched many Bibles, and I've read through Proverbs in many different translations. But the one I've been using for the last many years, look at this. I don't know how this is going to work. Thanks, Jesus. My buddy. Might have some other stuff in here. But I don't know if you guys can see where Proverbs is. It's all like I love to write in my Bible, and like it's just the thing that I read a lot of different stuff, but this is the one I read every day. So if I just kind of open it to Proverbs, there goes some of it. It's kind of a problem, right? Like, I don't know what to do. I guess I could get a new Bible, but like I don't want to because there's so much like stuff that I've written to help me remember as I read it. Anyway, you read it that many times, it really starts to sink in, and it's kind of, I don't know, I certainly have not arrived at wisdom, but I'll tell you this. Surely I'm way less foolish than I would be with not 250 times reps through the Proverbs, 20 plus years of reading this, maybe not every day, but most days. It's pretty much my goal every day. We've got the Bible app now too, that if sometimes like I don't have this beast of a Bible on me, I can just like flip and do it on my phone. I've at least made a few more wise choices than I would have without having let this wisdom soak in. So that sermon, it was a hinge point in my life simply because it caused me to take a step toward chasing God's wisdom. Because yes, Solomon says, this is the wisdom of Solomon. Chris talked about it in part 1, the wisest person who ever lived. But it's also, I would call it like divinely inspired wisdom. Like this is just a bit more than Solomon says. This is in some kind of way that I probably couldn't explain today, nor do I fully understand. God had something to do with this, and God probably had something to do with us still having these sayings of Solomon all these thousands of years later, which is a beautiful mystery how that works. But this is divinely inspired wisdom that we've gotten. I'm so grateful that day when I was 19, I just took a step toward chasing God's wisdom for myself. And I believe my life is entirely different from that point on. That's why I call it a hinge point. So I won't try to hide it from you. That's actually my goal today, is that maybe this little bit of time that we have together could be a similar hinge point for somebody else in the room. Maybe you're not 19, maybe you're older like myself, but it's like, 5 to 7 minutes a day, I could give that a try. Maybe even kind of nonchalantly like I did, and then just see what begins to happen. Because I've spent, like I said, over 20 years, over half my life, actively, intentionally chasing wisdom. And I guess at some point it just starts to make a difference. It's different than a lot of things, though, because at some point, I don't know, maybe 10 years in, 9, 11 years in, people would all of a sudden start to say, I didn't notice it first, but they would say, that was really wise, Patrick. That's a really wise choice you made there. That's a really wise thing that you had to say. And after about, I don't know, half a dozen of those, it's like, really? I did something wise. That's cool. And then people started to say, like, I want to come to you for wise advice. Like, you always give the wisest advice. I'm like, really? Like, you're just asking me a question. I'm just thinking, Not like I'm quoting the Proverbs and all the like wise advice I guess I give. Then people would start saying like, I don't know, 5, 6, even more recently, like years ago, you're one of the wisest people I know. I want to spend more time. I'm like, what do you say to that? Like, what do you do with that? My first knee jerk is, we need to introduce you to some wiser people, I think, if I'm like one of the wisest people. But it's like, really? Like, what? How? When did this happen? And it's just so different. I think attaining wisdom, like Solomon says, is one of the goals or one of the benefits that comes from reading his sayings. Attaining wisdom is not like a lot of things, like you take a class and you go through 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and you can kind of see when you move up the rankings. Or like my youngest son, he's been taking Taekwondo and he's all into it. And there's very specific things. If he kind of does those things and he passes that thing, he gets the next belt, and that's really exciting because you've mastered a certain level and you get another belt. Like, wisdom does not work that way. It's more like, I don't know, just woke up one day and all these years and years and years later, it's like, something must have happened. Something must have changed inside me. I think it's a little bit like physical therapy. Anybody ever had to do physical therapy in the room? You're not ashamed to admit it? Yeah, we hate physical therapy, for sure. I've had to do it many different times, unfortunately. Most recently, I had to start it again because I've got bad knees, got no cartilage in either knee, and but also play soccer like 6 mornings a week. And kind of the overcompensation is what this doctor expert said, overcompensating because of my bad knees. I've really messed up my hips and my back, and so I actually went to do physical therapy for my hips and my back, and so he had this whole plan, and it was not fun. I'll put it that way. But then he's like, hey, because I was about to give up soccer, and he's like, hey, try this before you go play soccer. I go play early, first thing every morning. He's like, here's a dynamic warm-up I'm gonna give you. Do this every single day before you play soccer. It'll only take 5 or 10 minutes. So he shows me like the very first thing, like stretch or exercise, I don't know what to call it. I can't really do it for you here right now. It'd be pretty awkward, but kind of like this runner's pose, drop really low, this hand's on the ground, and he just dropped his elbow right on the ground as well, like just kind of in between here, like spread really wide. And he's like, you try it. So I get down, do the whole thing, kind of moving like pretty rough, and my elbow's about this far from the ground, like not close at all. And I'm like, am I doing it right? He's, oh yeah, you're doing it right. Just, you just do what you can do. He's like, pretty soon, you'll have your elbow on the ground. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? How will do you see where my elbow is? And, he kind of like shoved on my back. He's like, yeah, you're pretty, you got some issues. Like, okay. So I just, I'll just do what he says. And sure enough, like I could feel things just working better. And it was, maybe an hour a day worth of physical therapy. And it just became a habit. I just started doing it. It's like, you know what? I feel better. I'm not just in pain all the time. I'm still able to play soccer. This is great. And just kind of forgot about the whole thing. It's mindless. It's 5:55, 6 a.m. Sun's just starting to come up. That's when we're playing soccer every morning. My brain's not really on. So I just started doing this in my sleep. When I first started, I would have to take the phone out where he videoed it for me, what to do. And I'd have to follow it and do each thing as he but after a few weeks, I had it down. I just do it literally without thinking. And then, so this was maybe a year ago, I started this physical therapy. It was about somewhere around a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago. I'm out. It had kind of rained. It was still kind of drizzling. It was kind of muddy out. And I was like, oh man, I got mud and kind of wet on my elbow. And I switched sides. I just remember having that thought. And I was like, wait a second. My elbow's on the ground. I didn't even realize it. I don't know how many days it had happened, but this is the first time it dawned on me, my elbow is somehow touching the ground. It had changed that much over the course of a year. And it was just imperceptible. It was, I don't know how it works. Maybe it was like a millimeter every day, just a little bit closer. Things in my back, my hips, my knees, they worked themselves out a little bit more. But I didn't realize, really, that it was happening. I didn't think much of it. I didn't realize I was becoming, I don't know what to call that, flexible again. Until the day it was like, oh, boom. There it is. I think it's so similar when it comes to wisdom. It was just this little bit, 5 to 7 minutes a day, 5 to 7 minutes a day, 5 to 7 minutes a day until, wow, years and years later, maybe hundreds of times later, it seemed to soak in. It seemed to sink in. It seemed to somehow affect the way that I lived, the way I made choices. Here's how Solomon talks about it in Proverbs chapter 2. I think the way that wisdom works. He wrote, with this wisdom, you'll be able to choose the right road, seek justice, and decide what is good and fair, which, I don't know, I maybe should have left this off because that's a whole sermon in itself. Maybe we can do for another day. It's like, wow, isn't that worth it right there? Like if we could attain wisdom simply to be able to choose the right road in life, what a beautiful thing. That's what we all want. To be able to seek justice and decide what is good and fair. What a beautiful thing. But that's what you're going to be able to do with this wisdom. Because, here's why it's going to work out like that. Because wisdom will penetrate deep within, and knowledge will become a good friend to your soul. As I look back now, 20 years, It's like, oh yeah, that's a good summary. That's kind of what it's done, even kind of without me realizing it's become a good friend to my soul. He writes in Proverbs 4, take these in, take in these wise sayings, let them soak in, which is beautiful. I'm not going to that verse just yet. Sorry, I was just a proverb came to mind in Proverbs 4. It made me think this. A wise person is made, not born. Nobody's born wise, right? Anybody got kids in the room? I feel like I'm seeing a lot of parents, even when they're, I don't know, teenagers especially, maybe like we have to become wise. Nobody's born that way. You can be born, I don't know, tall, I guess, with the genes to, you're eventually going to be tall. You can be born short. You can be born athletic. You can be born rich even, like born, into a rich family. You just can't be born wise. That's something that we have to become. Because again, it's like physical therapy. If you're not currently able, if you're this far away from being a wise person, day after day, proverb after proverb, it can slowly start to sink in, and it's this beautiful journey. I love how Solomon, in a lot of his sayings, he personifies wisdom as this. I picture as this kind of like slightly older, like not old, but just like, a little bit experienced, wiser, regal woman. Lady Wisdom, he personifies wisdom as, which is beautiful. And there's all these images throughout Proverbs, like she's standing on like the top of a house, crying out to everybody, like, hey, come in. I've got this banquet table spread with all the best food, the best wine. Just come and spend some time with me. And I love the imagery and the way Solomon writes about it, because it gives the idea of, we might have the wrong picture of wisdom, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna try to be wise, but it's gonna be really difficult, and I'm gonna kind of get like slapped on the wrist because I'm gonna make some poor choices, some unwise choices if we're being nice. But no, this idea of Lady Wisdom gives us the picture of, hey, you're invited to this fancy banquet. You maybe don't have all the etiquette figured out, like I would not, but it's just like, hey, just come in, go ahead and start eating. I'm welcoming people. There's a diverse table. And as we go, I'll just kind of point out maybe, hey, don't use that fork first. You're actually supposed to start with that fork. And we just figure it out as we go. And it's this idea of just on-the-job training just start living life, reading Proverbs on the side, and just see what happens. Just see how it begins to affect the way that we live life. If you guys remember, I said a little bit earlier that our relationship to wisdom is one of the defining features of our lives. Just for you personally, think back to maybe, I don't know, pick out 2 or 3 unwise choices, let's call them, that you've made in your life. Like maybe some big ones, like maybe that weekend that came to mind, that marriage, maybe for some of you, that tweet, that social media post, that job that you took that you maybe wish you never would have. Whatever the decision is for you, whatever that unwise choice was, think back on it. Would life not have been better if you had just attained the wisdom that would have kept you from making that unwise choice, or that would have helped you in that moment make a better financial decision, whatever the thing was? Of course it would. This is one of the defining features of our lives and determines how our lives go. And I bet for the majority of those unwise decisions that you made, I would dare say for all of them, Proverbs would have had something to say about it. And I'm not saying like, verbatim, your exact specific situation, but Proverbs, Solomon, would have had some wisdom to share that would have at least affected your decision-making process, that would have at least allowed some wisdom to soak in to your mind, to your heart, to who you are. And maybe it would have made it go differently. Let's flip it a little bit, and maybe you can think back, hopefully, all of us in the room, on at least one wise decision that you've made in your life, maybe a few, that really changed the course of your life in a positive way. Maybe you can think of a few of those. Aren't you thankful? Aren't you glad that you had that wisdom? Or maybe for you, it was someone else with wisdom stepping in, to protect you from making an unwise choice, sharing their wisdom with you. Aren't you thankful for that wisdom that you had that helped you make that wise choice? And this is, I think, all we're talking about today. At another point in Proverbs, Lady Wisdom, like personified wisdom, says, hey, set your course for wisdom, which I think is beautiful. It's not like, be wise, because it doesn't work that way. We're not born wise. It's this, hey, just kind of turn, and we're going to try to live our lives in the direction of, just kind of aim your boat toward wisdom. And yes, maybe we'll get off track and we're going to make some unwise decisions along the way, but it's okay. Like in general, let's head that way, head that direction. And I think it makes all the difference. It's been a hinge point in my life. I hope maybe for some of us in the room today, it could be a hinge point for us too. As much effect as wisdom can have in our lives, why would we not want to take advantage of it, right? And it's here. There's a whole like book of these collected sayings of Solomon, divinely inspired, I believe, wisdom. So I've cut this way down. I've cut this sermon down. It was going to be much longer because I wanted to share with you guys some greatest hits, and I cut it down to like 3 or 4 greatest hits. I started with 10, and I just kept trimming it out, so you can thank me later. But I was just thinking, like, I can't pick just one thing like in Proverbs. Chris is lucky. He gets to like do a lot of these sermons. He can pick like a sermon just to focus on, humility and things like that last week, which is great. But I don't have that luxury. I just got to I got like one shot, to get some stuff out there. So I'm like, let me go through like maybe the greatest hits of Proverbs. And then as I was thinking through greatest hits, I grew up kind of like in the CD era. If anybody's old enough like me, you remember like a compact disc, a CD. Some people you don't know. I see you young faces out there. And we'd buy these greatest hits albums. But if you think about it, like greatest hits says who? Like the band probably didn't choose their greatest hit. Like is it the most like sold or most requested? Probably some like marketing executive is who chose what the greatest hits are. And actually now we live in an era where we've got Spotify, we've got all, like we can curate our own playlist. If you love the deep tracks, it doesn't matter. You can make your own greatest hits, your own curated playlist. So that's more like, I think, what I've done. Because it's to say like some greatest hits of Proverbs or like these greatest themes of Proverbs, we'd be here all day. And so I just picked out 3. I had to narrow it down to, or maybe it's 4. I had to narrow down like to a very small grouping of just kind of these themes. When I think about Proverbs, it's like, wow, I've really been helped by the wisdom on these kind of ideas. And the first one is kind of interesting. It's just Solomon's sayings on the importance of getting wisdom, how direly important this is. In Proverbs 4, he writes this in a couple different portions of Proverbs 4. Whatever it takes to gain wisdom, do it. Like, whatever it takes. Like 5 minutes less time on social media and spend 5 minutes, like whatever it takes. Whatever you got to do it. That's how important it is. Tighten your grip around wise advice. Don't let it slip away. Protect wisdom. She's personified. Protect wisdom, for without her, life isn't worth living. That feels a little dramatic, right? Really? Like without wisdom, that's how important, that's how crucial wisdom is to our lives. He writes in Proverbs 19, whoever gains a wise heart loves his own soul. This is really important, dire stuff. Another greatest hit theme for me, just making decisions. He writes in Proverbs 8, the one who listens to me, who carefully seeks me in everyday things, just regular old life stuff, and delays action until my way is apparent, until wisdom is apparent, that one will find true happiness. Delaying action? Are we even allowed to say that? That's like a curse word, modern Western culture, right? To delay action? Can you imagine? Delaying action? Wow. We're really bad. You guys are pretty great at it. I am really bad at delaying action. That's difficult. It's just not how it works. But it is amazing the wisdom that can come along with it. Is amazing the magical wisdom that can be downloaded into our brains with simply a good night's sleep. I'm so grateful. My wife and I decided when we got married, kind of been reading Proverbs for a while, and like had some of these. There's so many more Proverbs that I don't have time to read now that kind of give this wisdom around decision making, like just don't be in a rush. And it's like, hey, when it comes to financial decisions, let's just not make like any big purchases, and we kind of set like a dollar amount without sleeping on it at least. There's just like one night's sleep. Doesn't matter. They're going to say, the sales tactic, you'll never get this deal again, blah, blah, blah. And I'm so thankful, literally about 1 month ago, we were found ourselves in this sales presentation that it was like this amazing deal. We had to take the opportunity right now. It was too good to be true. Turned out it was. But it was so amazing. It's like we can save so many thousands of dollars through the years if we take advantage of this. And we kind of looked at each other like there was this moment of, Do we go back on our commitment to wisdom? Like this feels like the wise advice, of Solomon. Should we ditch it? Because if we're ever going to ditch it, this is the moment to ditch it. It's like, no, we're going to sleep on it. So I slept on it, woke up the next morning. I was like, I should Google. I should do a little bit of research maybe. Turns out there was a 2020, you remember that show? Maybe they still have it, 2020 on TV, like an expose on this company and how big fat liars they are. Like liar, liar, pants on fire. They just trick everybody, steal their money, and like there's not much you can do about it. And I was like, holy cow. Maybe you never thought about a good night's sleep as a spiritual or holy thing, but in that moment I was like, wow, like I feel so much wiser today, so much more in control of my decision making. I love this one in Proverbs 19, kind of the last half of the proverb that Solomon wrote. Whoever moves too quickly misses the turn, right? You ever done that, just driving in your car? I can't help but see my middle son, Liam. He's just started mowing yards in the neighborhood, like to make a little bit of money. We've got this little riding mower. He just wants to go 100 miles an hour. And he kind of sees like the edge of where he mowed like the last loop. And so he just goes ahead and turns like he's going so fast. Inevitably, pretty much every other turn, he misses like a little chunk of the grass on every turn. And so I'm always out there with him just for safety, like, walking around. And so I'm like, buddy, I told you, just slow down. Just go a little bit slower. It will take you way less time because, come here, look, there's about 19 turns you got to go back and like redo because you missed the turn. Like you're going too quickly. So much wisdom in that. Another idea of decision-making, wisdom that comes along with it, Solomon wrote about in Proverbs 4. And this truly probably is a greatest hit. If you've, heard people talk about Proverbs before, you've maybe heard this one. He wrote in Proverbs 4 toward the end. And he's saying all these great things. In fact, I thought about reading like the previous 4 or 5 verses. You should just go do that maybe on Thursday or Friday of this week. It'll be the 4th. Here's what he wrote, though. Above all else, above all this other stuff, really important stuff I've been talking about, all the important stuff you can think of, above all else, watch over your heart. Diligently guard it, because from a sincere and pure heart come the good and noble things of life. Just last week, my wife and I just made a big decision for sake of our daughter, essentially based on this. This was our lens. It was this wisdom, because we would not have made this decision if not for this, because the most important thing when it comes to her, an 11-year-old little girl in this very formative time of life, the most important thing, this is what settled it for us, is her heart. And diligently guarding her heart and trying to help her diligently guard her heart. And it's a decision that if you asked us a couple years ago, it's probably something that we swore we'd never do. But you know what? It's wise in this moment because of this wise advice from Solomon, because it's all about the heart. And man, if we all lived that way, realizing that guarding our heart is the most, that's the thing we need to watch over above all else. Another greatest hit for me is, actually, before I read these to you, maybe I'd probably just graduated college, maybe, so maybe a couple years after, maybe 6 years into, like I've been 6 years through the Proverbs every month. And I'm like, man, I never realized Proverbs, like Solomon had a lot to say about money. I don't really think of those guys as even having money. Like, you just feel like so disconnected sometimes. If you start reading Proverbs, it's amazing how kind of modern day the wisdom is. Somehow, even though it was thousands of years ago, these principles, this wisdom apply to our lives in major ways. So so much money is popping up. So it was coming towards the end of the month. I was like, you know what? Next month, as I read through Proverbs, I've got like my little journal that I kind of jot down thoughts, questions, like wisdom that I'm learning as I read through Proverbs. I'm going to just like go to the back, and every time money comes up, every time money is mentioned, I'm just going to write down what it says and like just ask some questions about it, right? And just kind of see what kind of themes emerge. There's a whole lot. Like every economic issue you can think of, it seems like Proverbs, Solomon addressed it with his wisdom. But you know what I felt at the end of a month of going through and just like really writing down everything Proverbs had to say about money? I was like, man, you know what would be wise? I need to be more generous. I need to give away more of my money. Because let me just read you a few of these like greatest hits. Here's what Solomon wrote in Proverbs 11. All right, there's kind of two different people juxtaposition. One shares liberally, like gives it away, and yet gains even more. Kind of counterintuitive. While another hoards more than is right. Did you even realize that it's possible? It's possible for a person to hoard, to keep for themselves more than is right. There's actually a line that we can cross to keep too much for ourselves. And it becomes to a point where it's actually not right to hoard that much. There's another person who hoards more than is right and still has need. Is that not like the description of the culture, the society we're living in today? Like how many times have I probably said, like we are in the top couple percent richest people in the entire world, and yet what do I constantly say anytime I'm in money conversations? Like, oh, I just need a little bit more, right? Like I just don't quite have enough. And yet, look at how much I have. Doesn't make any sense, but here's Solomon writing about it thousands and thousands of years ago. Wisdom would say, we're not giving enough of it away. Solomon wrote in Proverbs 19. Yeah, I'll skip to Proverbs 19. I cut a lot of these out for you guys' sake as well, so we can all get to lunch at some point. Whoever cares for the poor makes a loan to the Eternal. Such kindness will be repaid in full and with interest. I'm going to jump to Proverbs 29. Solomon wrote, the just get involved with the poor and know their issues. It reminds me of the sermon I did years ago that essentially called care about what the people you care about care about. The just get involved with the poor and know their issues, but the wicked cannot even comprehend such concerns. Like we're rich. Why do you care so much about poor people? Like, you've got no connection to them. Proverbs 21, Solomon wrote, all day, every day, the greedy want more. Another pretty timely description. While those who live right give generously. And I'll end with this one in Proverbs 28. Whoever gives to the poor will have what he needs, but the one who shuts his eyes to their plight will face curse after curse. So much counterintuitive, kind of countercultural wisdom in there to give to the poor. Just, isn't that what any of us want? Just to have what we need? Simple life. Integrity is the last greatest hit I just want to touch on. And this was maybe more recent. This is maybe only like 10 years in, maybe 10 years ago. I saw integrity pop up as this major theme, this major greatest hit in Proverbs. And not just integrity, like, oh yeah, you should have integrity, but integrity along with his idea of, it's kind of the one thing to worry about. If you just like have integrity, everything else will pretty much take care of itself. I'm like, that's pretty wise actually. If you think about it, that's actually kind of true. For example, Proverbs 4, Solomon wrote, and as you go, know this, with integrity, you will overcome all obstacles. Even if you run, you won't stumble. Or Proverbs 10, the path of integrity is always safe. Or this idea, even though he doesn't use the word integrity, he writes in Proverbs 28, the wicked run away even when no one is chasing them. Again, I can't help but see my middle son, Liam. I always send him and his brother up, like, clean your room, don't do anything else, don't get anything out, clean your room, like that. You're not allowed to do anything else till you clean your room, don't play, don't get out like all the games. And I hear like, World War III up there, so I kind of like tiptoe up the steps. And as soon as Liam sees me, his eyes get big. They're having like full-on lightsaber battle, like Darth Vader mask, the whole thing, the room is torn apart. He sees me, he throws everything down, puts it away, runs like into his room and starts cleaning. I'm like, I see, like, you're not that quick. Like, let's send them to bed. It's supposed to be bedtime, and I hear them like not in bed, so I go up and check. Liam's eyes get big, shuts off the light, runs and jumps in bed, pull the covers over him, But it's crazy. Sometimes, even when I haven't given them something to do, like they can just be up there playing, it's fine. I'm not aware that anything unwise might be happening. I just walk up the stairs to say, hey, maybe I'll play Legos with you, And Liam just sees me and his eyes get big, he runs and like throws. I'm like, what are you running away for? Like there's nobody chasing you right now. You've got nothing to worry about. So we have these chats around integrity. Wouldn't it be easier? Like when you don't have this integrity, when you're up to something maybe you shouldn't be, people run away and nobody's even chasing them. The right living, however, stand their ground as boldly as lions. Like that's the way we want to feel we can live our lives. I love this, Proverbs 29, just the end of verse 6, how Solomon puts it. A man who lives right is free to sing and be glad. We've all felt that before, right? Like just, oh man, it's going to sleep like a baby tonight because there's nothing to worry about. Maybe like things aren't perfect. Integrity doesn't make things perfect, but it makes it so you can sleep like a baby tonight, right? You want to know how to sleep great at night? Ambien. Just kidding. Unless you need Ambien, of course. But no, it's integrity. Integrity is how? Because you have a clear conscience. doesn't really matter what else, the clear conscience is the secret to sleeping well at night. Solomon knew it. Integrity is the secret to just feeling like you're safe and you can live life. So I've actually got one more greatest hit that I want to just kind of share with you sneakily at the end. But before I do this, I sat down actually with my Bible and my Proverbs that are falling apart yesterday. I just read through it. You can read through all of Proverbs really quickly, maybe, I don't know, an hour or so. And I just wanted to pick out, and I just typed as fast as I could. Because I was thinking, there's going to be people sitting in the room, and I just can only hit these couple greatest hits, and they're like, I don't care about that. I really could use some wisdom on this. And I'm like, I bet the sayings of Solomon really provide wisdom for almost anything we could ever possibly face in our lives. So I just jotted down all the topics, just so we could kind of feel it. What are all the things that now after 20 years, 250 times-ish reading through this, I'm kind of informed with some wisdom around each of these things? You probably want to be too. So buckle up. We're going to put them on the screen. I'm going to read these as fast as I can. This is what Solomon says. This is what he has to talk about as he relates this divinely inspired wisdom to us. You ready? Everything Proverbs gives wisdom on. Temptation, generosity, alcohol, intimacy and sexuality, anger, controlling our temper, blessings, parenting, self-control, debt, work ethic, correction and discipline, respect and honor, ethics, happiness, holistic health, like physical, emotional, mental health. In fact, there's so many times I read the Proverbs and I had read this science article or this health article. I'm like, wow, science is catching up to Proverbs, a calm heart can add years to one's life, Solomon wrote. Or it's better to gnaw on a bit of dry crust in peace than to feast in a house full of stress. How many of you have had that Thanksgiving or Christmas gathering, right? It's man, Solomon knew thousands of years ago. Hope, mercy, envy, justice and righteousness, laziness, honoring our parents, even as adults, peer pressure, choosing our words wisely, social awareness, emotional intelligence, poverty, relationships, pride and humility. Chris knocked it out of the park last week on that. Trials and difficulties in life, faith and trust, honesty and dishonesty, marriage, business ethics, wealth, courage, theology, counsel and wise advisors. Chris got to talk about that last week as well. Satisfied life, living a satisfied life, which Solomon literally writes a couple times that integrity is the way. Having integrity is a way to live a satisfied life. Enemies, fear, gossip, depression, love, choosing friends, which we think about as only something for, younger folks. But no, there's all these studies out now that show even as adults, you are who your friends are. You will be soon. And Solomon talks about it so many times. Authority, integrity, repentance, conflict, forgiveness, conscience, decision-making, government, the heart, empathy, grace. I'm almost out of breath. It's a lot, right? Anything pique your interest? It's oh yeah, I could use some wisdom on that. We're only halfway done, so buckle back up. Employee-employer relationships, orphans and widows, favor, community, fools, worry, friendship, God, politics, neighborliness, hiring. This is a beautiful proverb. I think it's Proverbs 10, and I'm so blessed to learn so much wisdom from Chris Brown through all these years working alongside him, with him at the church, and we had this grueling hiring process. So much wisdom was applied from just take some time, sleep on it. There's this beautiful proverb, Proverbs 10, as I had already embodied this culture of, we're not going to just hire really quickly. We want to make sure, get a good hire. I'm going to misquote it. It's something along the lines of, someone who just blindly shoots flaming arrows into a crowd. That's what it's like to just hire someone off the street. Just to hire someone before you fully vetted. It's like just closing your eyes and shooting a flaming arrow and you have no idea where it goes. Sorry, my ADHD. Greed, guilt, learning, nature, peace, pleasure, leadership, values or setting priorities, prudence, which is this amazing subset of wisdom, which sounds like a bad word because we don't use it, but prudence is an amazing thing. Constructive criticism, reputation, security, revenge, gullibility, saving money, virtue, self-awareness, self-examination, laughter, success, planning, stubbornness, mental health, scams, margin, truth, violence, waste, how to deal with, talk to difficult people. And then I've got a bunch more that I didn't want to put on a screen because I didn't know how to summarize it in one word. There's so much more wisdom on so many more things there's so much nuance. There's so much, it's amazing. I'm kind of feeling excited, the wealth of wisdom that is available to us to apply to our lives. And remember, wisdom pretty much determines how our lives go. But I'm going to land it with this. My last semester of college, story from I guess it was my second semester, but senior year, about to graduate, we had like these fraternities, or like Greek, like Beta Psi Delta, that's all I remember I was. It wasn't really fraternities, because again, it was the kind of strange Christian college I went to. It was like, basically like fraternities. And we would all gather every Wednesday, and it was maybe a couple hundred guys in this fraternity. And of course, we had like a chaplain, and I became the chaplain. And of course, you had to kick off your fraternity meeting with like a little mini sermon. So it was like this 5-minute like chance to preach. So for me, it was kind of cool, because it was like, my first chance to kind of try this out. And now I had been reading Proverbs every day for about 4 years. I guess it's more like 3 years. And I was like, wow, this is some really good stuff in here. I wish all my, fraternity brothers, all my friends, like if everyone did this, if everyone just read Proverbs every day, there'd be a lot less foolishness, a lot less dumb decisions, a lot less, things happening that happen on college campuses, I bet. So I'm just going to I want to just share this. So this is the way I chose to do it. And I actually thought about it. I almost called Chris a couple times, like, man, how can we pull this off? And I just decided not to, because I know you guys are a very sophisticated crowd. And it would have cost way too much money to get the same effect. So what I did is me and the kind of fraternity leadership folks, we all chipped in like $1 or $2. And I went down to the bank and exchanged all the ones for a crisp $20 bill that someone was going to win in this kind of fraternity gathering. Now, you have to understand, this is a long time ago. This is like probably 2005-ish or so. $20 to a poor college student, maybe some of you can remember, this is like gold. College students don't do anything for $20. This is like a semester's worth of ramen noodles, right? This is $20. I knew that everybody in the room would kill for $20. So I got to the room a little bit early. I hid the $20. And I was like, okay, everybody listen up. There's if you believe me, there's $20 hidden in this room, and one of you are going to have it. But don't nobody move, because everybody's like, got their attention right away. You guys believe me? I got $20 hidden for you. Yeah, we all believe you. You have to listen for me to whisper, go. Because you can't move until I say go, and I'm going to whisper it. If you don't hear me, you're going to be late. But you got to really pay close attention, because I might not say go the first time. I might say go. And if you go before it's too early, you're out. Like, you're disqualified. So you really got to listen closely, pay attention. And then I made them all scream, shout at the top of their lungs, I want $20. And some of them didn't say it loud enough. I was like, nope, you're going to be out. Like, I need the proper amount of gusto, kind of like agony, volume. And so they're like, I want $20. They all wanted it really, really, really badly. Then I actually made everybody drop to their knees and do one of these and beg. Like, I would shout it again, and I just want you to beg, like, I want $20. Like, I need $20. And then when it finally started, we cranked up some music, I think. Like, somebody brought a speaker, and we were playing some music. It was really loud, so it was even difficult to kind of sift through and hear me saying, go. When I finally did, we just kind of had cell phones, but there wasn't any such thing as videoing what was happening. I wish I had a video of this just to show you guys. You've never seen anything like this. So it was in an old classroom, and it was chairs, but they had the desks built into it. Desks were flipping and flying. I remember one guy seriously had a bloody nose. People were throwing elbows. They were on top of each other. People's clothes were torn. It was madness. In fact, I don't know if he was a dean. I don't know what the other people in charge are called, not deans, but someone who was in charge. I thought we were going to get shut down at one point. They came to the room, got a report. This went on. It was probably only about 5 minutes it lasted, but it felt like a half an hour, right? This was just absolute chaos, madness. I figured if we did something like that today, I'd need $1,000 at least, or $10,000. I was trying to think what would make them act that way, because that's what I want. I wanted everybody going nuts. Maybe you can tell me later. But I figured whatever it was, I don't have that. And even if Chris chipped in, we're not going to come up with that much. So I'll just tell you the story of when it used to be $20, right? So I was just kind of sitting up here on a stool like this, and I noticed, it's just, I don't know how to describe it other than madness, but there's one kid, I still don't even know who he was. I had seen him before, I guess, but I didn't know his name. He kind of wandered out to the edges. He kind of removed himself from the fray, and he just started walking around the edges of the room, and he gets to the very back. It was directly in the back from me where the little clock was. And he pulls over one of the desks that had been flipped upside down and probably broken. He stands up on the chair, takes the clock down, and he finds the $20 that I had hidden there. And I'm like, okay, everybody, we've got a winner. Everybody comes back, and it takes forever. They're putting the room back together. People are running to the bathroom, wiping the blood off. And I just read the beginning of Proverbs 2, where Solomon says this, my son, if you accept what I'm telling you and store my counsel and directives deep within you, if you listen for Lady Wisdom, attune your ears to her and engage your mind to understand what she's telling you, if you cry out for her insight and beg for her understanding, if you sift through the clamor of everything around you to seek her like some precious prize, to search for her like buried treasure. I was probably reading out of the old King James. I think it might have said hidden treasure or something like that. Then you will grasp what it means to truly respect the eternal, truly this fear of the Lord. And you will have discovered the knowledge of the one true God. I love this. Don't miss this. The eternal God is ready to share his wisdom with us. God's ready to, for his words bring true knowledge and insight. And that was as long as my sermon was. I just said, if you guys did all this for $20, how much more should we for wisdom? And then I said, let me tell you how much more. 2 more things Solomon wrote, the last greatest hits. They're very similar. In Proverbs 8, Solomon says, accept my personified wisdom, accept wisdom's correction as being more valuable than your prized possession. Authentic knowledge more valuable than pure gold. You see, no gem is more precious than Lady Wisdom. Your most extravagant desire doesn't come close to her. How fortunate are those who discover Lady Wisdom in Proverbs 3, and those who understand her ways, for her worth is far greater than the most expensive prize you could win. Her profit is greater than the finest thing you could buy. No gem is more precious than she is. And maybe you're thinking of what your most extravagant desire is. I don't know, maybe it's coming to mind. Your most extravagant desire doesn't come close to her. And I just imagine I don't know, maybe some of you are like too dignified even for $10,000, but if I had $10,000 hidden in the room, the level of searching that would happen, you would do anything, probably, that I asked you to do. Like everybody would be looking silly, would be looking foolish. But Solomon says, wisdom is infinitely more valuable. It doesn't even compare to your most extravagant desire. So I just want to leave you with this one question to go home asking yourself. How am I chasing God's wisdom? Because probably reading Proverbs every day is not the only way. I'm sure we can surround ourselves with wise people, right? Like we become wise. There's all kinds of ways. I'm sure there's books, there's podcasts, there's all kinds of things. Experience builds it. But how are you? How are you chasing God's wisdom? Because surely we have to take some kind of step if wisdom is this valuable. To have this kind of wisdom on offer and not take a step toward it would surely be unwise, to put it nicely. So, I don't know. Maybe try starting today, reading a proverb every day. It's the 30th, right? I think July the 30th. Spoiler alert, if you read it today, it's not actually what Solomon says. Today is Agur, the son of Jakeh, I don't know much about, but it's pretty good. It's pretty wise. Tomorrow is actually going to be King Lemuel, Proverbs 31. For some of you familiar with it, it's kind of like a greatest hit proverb in and of itself, the whole thing. But then by Tuesday, you'll be back to Solomon for about 29 days in a row. Just give it a try. Get started. I wonder, anybody in the room spend at least 5 to 7 minutes a day scrolling through social media, like watching TikTok videos or Instagram stories or something? It's like a habit. You don't even know you're doing it. It's just like, oh, I got 5 minutes to spare. Let me just see what if you just flip the habit, Some of you are like, I spend 5 to 7 hours actually, scrolling through stuff, What if you just take just 5 minutes of it to have the Bible app on your phone, just what day is it? Okay, I'll read that proverb for today. And then you can have, 4 hours and 55 minutes or whatever to go back to your TikTok scrolling. Actually, after a few days of Proverbs, maybe you'll maybe be less and less on the scrolling side. I don't think I can express how much this has changed my life, and I try to do it with my kids as they started getting older. I'm like, you guys should read Proverbs every day, and it's it's difficult So I just came up with, I was like, maybe they need like an incentive, or we got to like make it fun somehow. So I started this thing, I don't know, I think it was back in like 2020 after COVID hit. We had kind of a little bit more time stuck all together. I was like, we're going to do something called Popcorn and Proverbs, because they love popcorn. And it's simple. We just pop some popcorn. Everybody's got a popcorn bucket, and we just read the proverb for that day. And I've learned a lot of things like early on, like, okay, we can't read the whole proverb because basically when the popcorn runs out, our time of talking through Proverbs runs out. So I kind of pre-select ahead of time, like that morning or like sometime before we gather, just like 4 or 5. And like they kind of each read them, and they love it, because they love popcorn. And sometimes like they didn't feel like popcorn, so we tried, ice cream. Maybe that's something you need, like an incentive, I don't know. But we called it Weiss cream in Proverbs. They thought it was, not that funny. But I don't know if it's working. I can say my 2 oldest, they read Proverbs on their own sometimes. And they have a lot of questions. They don't understand a lot of stuff. And we read like these different translations. They've got the NIRV, which is written on a 3rd grade level, which is, maybe sometimes more helpful for Proverbs. They certainly can quote certain Proverbs to their brother or sister when they've done something that is very unwise that they remember, which is like, okay, like something's starting to sink in. I don't know. But my only goal is like, man, if you could take a step toward chasing God's wisdom, it could be a habit. So I don't know what kind of incentive you need to give yourself. I would say pretty much anything, that's not unwise. Maybe like popcorn. Surely it doesn't have to rhyme, or like wise cream in Proverbs. I don't know. If you like ice cream, maybe it's like wisdom and whiskey for some of you. Then I don't know, sometime around the 20th through the 23rd of every month, you'll like gain a little bit of wisdom on like how much whiskey should go with the wisdom, and I think it'll work itself out. Because here's the thing, guys. There is no substitute for wisdom. Like, we can't get smart enough, strong enough, rich enough. Maybe you could get so rich that you could like pay people to make wise choices for you. I don't know. You just can't. Like, there's no substitute. We can't try hard enough. We can't have enough effort. So what are you going to do to chase God's wisdom? Because nothing replaces it. Let me pray for us. God, you're so good that you have somehow preserved these wise words of Solomon, that you've somehow divinely inspired. And we have them. We have this wealth of wisdom. And Solomon told us in Proverbs 2 that you, God, you want to give it to us. So God, help us chase it. Help us carve out a few minutes a day and make us wiser. Let the Proverbs, let your wisdom soak in. Let it become a good friend to our soul. And let us just as a people, as a church, as followers of you, be a little bit wiser. And maybe because of it, use us to join you in better ways in what you're up to in this world. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, you guys. I hope you had fun tracking along with me like I had fun talking through all this litany of Proverbs. 2 things to leave you guys with. One, for any college students in the room, 18 to 25 years old, kind of in that age range, or if you just know somebody, a college student, please make sure they know about this College House of Worship happening this evening. Invite them to it. When I was in college, I was a part of a thing at my church, like back home, that did something like this, and it made all the difference for a college student. It's a important time of life. So please invite folks that you know. If you know people here at the church, let them make sure they know about this. And don't forget to take 5. Last week, it felt like, come on, guys, we got to take 5. And then the rainstorm came, if you were here, and we all took like 35 because there was these amazing desserts, and it was raining, and nobody wanted to leave. So that was great. Today is beautiful, but still take 5 minutes. Meet somebody you haven't met. Talk with somebody who's already a friend. You guys enjoy some cheesecake, I think, that's out there for us. See y'all next time.